Sergeant Emily Carter stepped off the transport bus with her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, the morning sun glinting off her polished boots. The Marine Corps training base sprawled ahead like a fortress, its chain-link fences topped with barbed wire, the distant sounds of drill instructors shouting commands cutting through the crisp air. Emily's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the quiet thrill of challenge. She had dreamed of this moment for years, the moment she would prove that focus, patience, and determination mattered more than size or muscle. Her petite frame drew curious looks as she made her way across the parade ground. She had always been smaller than her peers, her slight build often a source of doubt for others. But Emily had learned early in life that strength came in many forms. At 12, she had spent countless afternoons at her father's shooting range, learning how to control her breathing, steady her hands, and focus on a target until it seemed almost alive. Now, at 22, all that training and discipline had led her here. The recruits around her were a mix of expressions, some anxious, some cocky, some indifferent. Emily remained calm, observing quietly. A group of men in the nearby barracks exchanged snickers. "She's going to get eaten alive on day one," one whispered. Emily didn't reply. She didn't need to. She had learned that observation was more valuable than words, that the quiet often saw more than the loud. Drill instructors stormed toward the recruits, barking orders in voices honed for fear and respect. Emily noted every detail, the way the other recruits stumbled over commands, the hesitations in their posture, the way some of them tightened their grips on their rifles. She felt a flash of anticipation. This was no longer just a dream. It was reality, and she intended to rise to the challenge. The first exercise was simple: formation drills, attention to commands, and basic coordination. The majority of recruits moved with uneven steps, some colliding with each other, others fumbling with gear. Emily, on the other hand, executed every movement with precision. She kept her posture upright, eyes forward, and followed instructions perfectly. Drill instructors were quick to notice the difference, their eyes narrowing at the recruits who faltered and lingering just long enough to acknowledge those who excelled. Emily could feel their gaze but refused to let it intimidate her. After hours of marching, correcting posture, and memorizing drill commands, the recruits were finally dismissed for a short break. Emily found herself sitting on a bench near the rifle range, watching as others complained about blisters, aching shoulders, and sunburn. Some laughed and joked to mask their discomfort. Others simply sat silently, staring at the ground. Emily's mind, however, was elsewhere. She was thinking about the rifle range, about the moment when she could finally demonstrate her skill. The other recruits glanced at her curiously. "You think you can handle the range better than anyone else?" one asked, half mocking, half curious. Emily merely smiled faintly, offering no answer. She knew that confidence alone was not enough. Precision, focus, and control were what counted, and she had honed these traits for years. When the next phase of training began, the recruits were led to the rifle range. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, mingled with the metallic scent of spent casings. Drill instructors barked instructions: stance, grip, sight alignment. The Marines around her were tense, some visibly nervous. Emily's hands felt steady, her breathing slow and controlled. She had practiced these movements countless times, each repetition ingrained in muscle memory. The first shots fired and the range erupted in chaos. Missed targets, flinched reactions, and frustrated exclamations echoed across the field. Drill instructors' voices rose above the din, shouting corrections and rebukes. Emily observed carefully, noting the mistakes others made. Gripping too tightly, jerking the trigger, failing to control their breathing. She made mental adjustments, reminding herself of the core principles her father had taught her: steady posture, controlled breath, deliberate focus. When it was finally her turn, Emily stepped forward, her heart calm despite the intensity around her. She assumed the stance she had perfected, aligning the sights carefully with the target. She inhaled, held her breath, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck dead center. A hush fell over the range as drill instructors and recruits alike turned to look. She repeated the motion, each shot landing with near-perfect precision. Murmurs spread quickly among the other recruits. This quiet, small-framed woman was scoring better than anyone expected. Drill instructors were intrigued. One stepped closer, scrutinizing her technique. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, a mixture of surprise and admiration in his tone. Emily only shrugged modestly. "Years of practice," she replied simply. There was no boast, no pretense, just skill and calm determination. Throughout the day, Emily continued to perform flawlessly. Her focus never wavered, even as other recruits struggled under the pressure. Each perfect shot increased her quiet confidence, though she never let it show arrogantly. Instead, she observed her peers, noting how they reacted to failure, how their morale dipped with each missed shot. Emily understood that the key to success wasn't just individual skill. It was the ability to inspire others, to elevate the group through example. By the end of the first day, whispers had begun to circulate. "Did you see Emily Carter on the range? She hit the target every time. She's unreal and quiet too. Can you believe it?" Even the more skeptical recruits found themselves watching her, learning from her movements and adjusting their own technique in subtle ways. Emily had not spoken much, but her actions had already begun to leave an impression. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Emily sat in the barracks, unpacking her belongings. Around her, recruits argued, joked, and complained about the day's challenges. Emily's mind, however, replayed every shot, every movement, every adjustment she had made. She felt satisfaction but no arrogance. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more tests, and she was ready. She knew this was only the beginning of her journey, and already, the first seeds of respect and awe were taking root among her fellow Marines. As she lay down that night, the distant echoes of drill instructors and the creaking of bunks around her faded into silence. Emily closed her eyes, visualizing the range, the targets, the perfect shots she intended to achieve. The quiet determination that had carried her through years of practice now propelled her forward into a world where every Marine, every instructor, and every challenge would soon recognize her not by her size or her quiet nature, but by the unwavering precision and focus that set her apart. The morning air was sharp and bracing as the recruits lined up at the rifle range. Emily Carter moved with quiet precision, her small frame standing upright, shoulders squared, eyes focused straight ahead. Around her, the other Marines were tense, adjusting grips and fidgeting nervously, their nerves fraying as they glanced at the targets. The drill instructors paced in front of the line, their shouts piercing the cold air, commanding attention and obedience. The atmosphere was thick with frustration. Most of the recruits had already missed their first shots during initial trials, their morale beginning to crumble. Emily watched silently, taking mental notes. Some Marines gripped the rifles too tightly, causing their shots to veer wildly off target. Others held their breath too long or jerked the trigger, letting tension ruin what could have been accurate fire. A few tried to mimic the stance of the instructor, but without understanding the subtle mechanics of control, their efforts were futile. Emily's eyes scanned the line, analyzing each mistake with the practiced attention of someone who had spent years perfecting her own skill. "Recruits, focus," a drill instructor barked, slamming his boot against the wooden deck. "We are not here to play games. Eyes on the target, hands steady. This is Marine Corps marksmanship." Emily's turn was not yet up. She noticed the frustration building among her peers. Sweat beaded on brows, fingers trembled on triggers, and curses slipped from lips. One recruit muttered under his breath, "I can't hit the broad side of a barn." Another swore at himself for missing a target he swore he'd hit in practice. Emily inhaled slowly, letting the chaos wash around her while she remained centered. When the instructor finally called her name, a hush fell over the line. Some Marines glanced over, curiosity mingled with disbelief. Emily stepped forward, rifle in hand, and assumed her stance. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, perfecting her grip, her posture, her breathing. She aligned the sights carefully, bringing the target into sharp focus. Her body was calm, her mind entirely present in the moment. The first shot rang out clean and precise. The bullet struck dead center, A ripple of astonishment passed through the ranks. "What the?" whispered one recruit, eyes widening in surprise. Emily's second shot was equally perfect. A third followed, unwavering in its precision. By the fifth shot, the murmurs had grown into audible astonishment. Even some drill instructors stopped packing to watch, nodding subtly in approval. Emily didn't gloat or boast. She simply maintained focus, each shot deliberate, controlled, flawless. Around her, other recruits' morale plummeted further. They had expected to see a novice flounder, perhaps make one lucky hit, but this quiet, diminutive woman was outperforming them effortlessly. A few tried to adjust their own technique, mimicking her movements, but panic and self-doubt made coordination impossible. The lesson was clear. Skill could not be faked, and talent, when coupled with calm, was undeniable. By mid-morning, the frustration on the range was nearly tangible. Drill instructors' voices grew louder, more insistent, but the chaos persisted. Bullets missed their marks, ricocheting off steel targets or embedding in dirt far beyond. Emily, meanwhile, methodically continued, each shot reinforcing the stark contrast between her skill and the struggles around her. She could feel the eyes of her peers on her, some in envy, some in awe. A few whispered, "How does she do that? Is she cheating?" But Emily remained undistracted, locked in a rhythm born from years of disciplined practice. The instructors decided to intervene. "Everyone stop, line up." The recruits froze, rifles in hand, some trembling. Emily's turn had paused only momentarily, but the others were struggling to regain composure. The instructors circled, correcting grips, adjusting stances, shouting instructions. Many recruits felt embarrassed as their mistakes were highlighted, some unable to follow corrections under pressure. Emily quietly noted each adjustment, recognizing where human error stemmed from tension, poor posture, or lack of focus. After the interruption, practice resumed. The frustration continued to mount. Bullets whistled past targets, some clattering harmlessly into the backstop, others smashing into metal plates without effect. A recruit cursed loudly after missing 3 shots in a row. Another's rifle jammed, and he pounded it in desperation. Emily watched, her own mind focused but empathetic. She understood the struggle. She had faced similar pressure in her youth during competitions, where nerves could betray even the most skilled marksman. Finally, the instructors allowed Emily to continue, recognizing her steadiness as an example. She adjusted her stance slightly, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. One by one, her bullets struck their intended points. Each shot drew quiet gasps from the other recruits. Whispers began circulating through the ranks. "She hasn't missed once. She's amazing. I've got to learn from her." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her skill was its own statement. By noon, the morale of the range was mixed. Some recruits, inspired by Emily, tried to refocus, their shots improving slightly. Others slumped, frustrated by their own lack of control. The drill instructors took note, observing that while the majority struggled under pressure, one individual was setting a standard of calm and precision that couldn't be ignored. Emily's quiet leadership, through demonstration rather than words, was beginning to affect the group subtly. Even the instructors nodded, recognizing that she might be key to transforming this struggling team. Emily's thoughts remained focused. Each bullet was a meditation in motion. Inhale, steady, aim, exhale, release. She knew that panic or haste could ruin even perfect form. Around her, chaos continued, but she remained a pillar of calm. A few recruits, noticing her method, began to mimic her breathing patterns, her stance adjustments, her measured trigger squeeze. Slowly, the energy of the range shifted. Frustration still lingered, but now a glimmer of hope had appeared, a possibility that improvement was achievable. As the session drew to a close, the drill instructors finally called the line down. Recruits slouched, exhausted from the intensity and pressure. Some muttered apologies or complaints, others simply stared at the ground, overwhelmed by failure. Emily stepped back, her rifle slung over her shoulder, her eyes calm but observant. Her performance had not only been flawless but transformative. Even in silence, she had begun to influence her peers, setting a quiet example that skill, patience and focus could overcome frustration and doubt. By evening, word of her performance had spread through the barracks. Recruits who had doubted her began nodding with respect, some even approaching cautiously, hopping to learn. The drill instructors acknowledged her subtly, impressed by her natural ability and composure under pressure. Emily didn't seek praise. She simply recognized that her first day had set the stage for something greater. She had arrived as a quiet recruit, underestimated by many, but already she had begun to change the dynamics of the group. That night as she lay in her bunk, the distant sounds of other recruits' complaints and laughter fading into the dark, Emily replayed the day's events in her mind. She reviewed each shot, each adjustment, each subtle shift in stance and breathing. The rifle had been more than a weapon. It was a tool, an extension of her discipline and focus. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, perhaps more demanding than today, but Emily was ready. She knew the journey ahead was long and arduous, yet she felt a quiet excitement. The seeds of respect, curiosity, and inspiration had been planted, and she was prepared to nurture them, one perfect shot at a time. The morning sun had just begun to peek over the horizon as Sergeant Emily Carter made her way back to the rifle range. The previous day's exercises were still fresh in her mind, along with the reactions of her fellow recruits. Their astonishment at her precision had been both amusing and instructive. Some had dismissed her quietly, whispering that she was too small to make any real impact, while others had begun to murmur their curiosity. Today, she would face her first real test, demonstrating her skill in a controlled live-fire exercise alongside the other recruits. The recruits lined up, rifles in hand, shoulders tense, faces reflecting a mixture of hope and anxiety. Emily's quiet presence drew attention as she assumed her position at the line. Her movements were fluid and deliberate, each adjustment of stance and grip precise. Drill instructors barked orders, calling for sight alignment, controlled breathing, and trigger discipline. Emily followed every command with meticulous care, her focus absolute. The first shots of the exercise erupted across the range. Missed targets, ricocheting bullets, and frustrated exclamations echoed. Marines were still struggling under pressure, their confidence shaken from yesterday's repeated failures. Emily's peers exchanged glances, some scowling at their own mistakes, others trying to learn from them. Emily's calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the chaos, a quiet anchor in the storm. When her turn came, Emily stepped forward, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing slightly as she aligned her sights. Her first shot struck dead center. A hushed murmur ran through the line, some incredulous, some admiring. She fired again, each bullet landing with precision, her movements smooth and controlled. Her peers could hardly believe what they were seeing. "She hasn't missed once," one recruit muttered under his breath. Another added, "It's like she's born to do this." Emily's success began to ripple outward. She didn't boast, didn't flaunt her skill. Instead, she offered subtle guidance, leaning slightly toward struggling recruits, demonstrating posture or breathing without words. She adjusted grips, showed how to control the squeeze of the trigger, and maintained a calm, measured pace. Slowly, the surrounding Marines began to imitate her actions, adjusting their form and focusing on technique. While they still missed occasionally, there was a noticeable improvement. Emily's example was infectious. Her quiet precision inspired others to try harder. Even the drill instructors noticed the change. One stepped closer, observing Emily closely. "That's impressive," he said, voice low but full of respect. "Not many recruits can stay this calm under pressure, let alone score consistently." Emily simply nodded, concentrating on her next shot. Her satisfaction was internal, measured, and quiet. This was not about accolades. It was about skill, mastery, and helping her peers find their potential. By mid-morning, the range had become a different place. The earlier chaos was replaced with tentative focus. Recruits adjusted their stances, focused on their breathing, and aimed deliberately. Emily continued to demonstrate flawless shooting, each shot reinforcing her authority through example. A few recruits whispered encouragement to each other, inspired by her methodical approach. "Watch her stance," one said. "Copy her breathing." Others began to realize that calm focus mattered more than brute strength or speed. As the exercise progressed, Emily's leadership became more apparent. She began to notice subtle mistakes and offered quiet corrections to those around her. "Keep your shoulders relaxed," she said to one recruit, demonstrating the proper form. "Breathe steadily, don't rush the shot," she reminded another. Her tone was never harsh, only instructive, and her patience helped to lower anxiety and frustration. Slowly, a transformation began to take shape among her peers. What had been a group floundering under pressure was now starting to resemble a cohesive team, guided not by fear, but by example. Some Marines, still skeptical, resisted her methods. They whispered behind her back, questioning her authority and ability to help. Yet even these doubters couldn't ignore the results. Scores improved gradually, and their respect for Emily, whether begrudging or genuine, began to grow. The quiet, focused recruit was no longer invisible. She was a benchmark, a source of subtle inspiration and practical guidance. By the afternoon, the instructors decided to add a competitive element. Each recruit would fire 5 rounds, their scores recorded and compared. Emily's peers were nervous. The pressure heightened by competition often caused them to falter. Emily, however, remained calm. Each shot she fired landed perfectly on target. The contrast with the others was striking. Whispers turned to murmurs of admiration. "How does she do it?" one recruit asked. "I've been practicing for weeks and can't even hit half the targets," said another. Emily simply exhaled, reloading her rifle and preparing for the next round. Her success had more than just tactical implications. It had psychological effects. Marines who had doubted themselves began to see what was possible. Some approached her after rounds, asking for guidance. Others silently adjusted their own techniques, imitating the subtle cues she provided. Emily realized that her role was evolving from participant to mentor, her influence extending far beyond her own performance. This quiet leadership was unprecedented for someone so new to the base, yet it was effective. By the end of the day, the transformation was clear. The rifle range was no longer a place of chaos and frustration. Emily's presence had brought focus, patience, and incremental improvement. Drill instructors exchanged approving glances, recognizing that this small, determined recruit had sparked a shift in morale and performance. She had become a catalyst, demonstrating that skill, discipline, and composure were more powerful than raw strength or bravado. That evening, back in the barracks, Emily reflected on the day. The initial skepticism she had faced seemed almost absurd now. She had earned a quiet respect from her peers and instructors alike, not through words or boasting, but through consistent demonstration of skill and patience. She understood that her journey was only beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and perhaps more opportunities to guide and inspire. She unpacked her gear slowly, checking her rifle, wiping it clean, and preparing for the next day's exercises. Around her, other recruits were restless, some talking loudly about the day's performance, others quietly reflecting on their own mistakes. Emily listened, absorbing details, learning the rhythm and psychology of her fellow Marines. She knew that leadership wasn't just about precision. It was about timing, empathy, and understanding how to elevate others without breaking their confidence. As darkness fell, Emily lay on her bunk, reviewing each moment on the range in her mind. She replayed every shot, every adjustment, every subtle interaction that had begun to change the dynamic of the group. Her skill was undeniable, but she recognized that her true challenge would be sustaining influence and consistency, helping others reach their potential while maintaining her own excellence. The seed of respect had been planted, and Emily was determined to nurture it, one precise shot at a time. By the time the lights were out, the barracks were silent. Yet even in the quiet, Emily's presence lingered in the minds of her peers. She had proven that focus, determination, and patience could turn an underdog into a benchmark of excellence. And though the real test was still ahead, both she and the Marines around her knew that a new force had emerged on the rifle range, one that would challenge expectations and inspire change. The sun rose over the training base, casting long shadows across the rifle range. For most recruits, the day promised another grueling set of exercises, but for Sergeant Emily Carter, it was a day of deeper reflection. The excitement of her early success had faded slightly, replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt. Could she truly lead her peers, or was her perfect aim merely a temporary anomaly? Though she had inspired others, Emily knew that every Marine's skill could crumble under pressure, and she feared that her quiet influence might not be enough. As she approached the range, Emily observed her fellow recruits with careful attention. Some were improving, replicating her stance and breathing techniques. Others, however, still struggled under pressure, their frustrations bubbling over into sighs, muttered complaints, and clenched fists. Emily felt a pang of empathy. She had once been that anxious recruit herself, staring down a rifle and questioning her ability to perform. She reminded herself that leadership wasn't about perfection. It was about guiding others through uncertainty, demonstrating consistency, and earning trust. The drill instructors wasted no time. "Today," one barked, "we're increasing the challenge. Every Marine must fire under time constraints while maintaining accuracy. No excuses, focus is everything." A collective shiver ran through the ranks. The pressure intensified, some recruits faltered, fumbling with their rifles or letting nerves control their shots. Emily took a deep breath, centering herself, while the chaos of trembling hands and frustrated voices swirled around her. She had faced nerves before, during competitions and long hours at her father's range, but this was different. Her peers' morale depended on her example, and that weight pressed upon her shoulders. Emily's first shots were flawless, each bullet striking the center of the target. Her body felt in perfect harmony with the rifle, posture, breathing, and focus aligned. Yet for the first time, a flicker of doubt emerged. What if she faltered in front of everyone? What if her peers lost confidence despite her success? The thought tightened her chest momentarily. She exhaled, telling herself that doubt was natural but must not interfere with precision. Focus, she reminded herself, not fear. As the drill continued, Emily noticed subtle signs of tension in her peers. One recruit's hands shook violently, causing repeated misses. Another clenched the rifle too tightly, jerking every trigger pull. Their eyes darted nervously toward Emily as if seeking reassurance or guidance. She recognized their fear. It mirrored her own early anxieties, but she also saw opportunity. Quietly, she shifted her stance slightly to demonstrate better balance and control, hoping the others might notice. Some did. Others continued to flounder. After several rounds, the drill instructors paused the exercise. Emily felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to see one of them, Captain Reynolds, observing her intently. "You're exceptional, Carter," he said, his voice low but firm. "But skill alone won't carry the unit. Can you keep your calm when the pressure is on for everyone else?" Emily nodded. "I'll do my best, sir," she replied, though inwardly she questioned if she could truly sustain influence without becoming frustrated herself. The next drill was grueling. Time limits were reduced, the targets smaller, and distractions increased. Other recruits were visibly panicked, missing shots they had previously landed with ease. Emily could feel her own heart rate rise slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of the environment. For the first time, she wondered if her calmness could waver under prolonged stress. She reminded herself to breathe, to trust her muscle memory and experience, and to focus on the fundamentals: stance, sight alignment, breathing, and trigger control. As Emily moved through her rounds, a sudden distraction nearly broke her concentration. A recruit beside her slammed his rifle down in frustration, causing a loud clang that echoed across the range. Emily's hand wavered slightly, but only for a moment. She exhaled, refocused, and fired again. The bullet hit dead center. Relief washed over her, a reminder that while distractions could arise, maintaining composure was key. Observing the effect her steadiness had on others was also enlightening. The same recruit who had caused the commotion now glanced at her with cautious admiration, mimicking her breathing technique. By midday, the stress of the drills began to weigh heavily on Emily. Her shoulders ached from hours of standing perfectly still, her eyes strained from repeated focus on distant targets. She noticed a creeping tension in her grip, a small but significant change from earlier perfection. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself mentally. She recalled her father's advice during long hours at the range. "Emily, it's not the rifle that makes the shot, it's the mind behind it. Calm the mind, control the body, and the bullet will find its way." That memory steadied her. Yet doubts persisted. Could she really sustain this level of performance under the increasing challenges of training? What if a single failure undermined the confidence she had worked so hard to inspire in her peers? Emily realized that leadership carried a weight far heavier than she had imagined. It was not enough to excel herself. She had to shoulder the responsibility of others' morale, guiding them quietly while managing her own uncertainties. During a short break, Emily spoke to a fellow recruit struggling with accuracy. "Focus on your breathing," she said softly. "Don't rush the trigger. Let your body align naturally with the rifle." The recruit hesitated, then tried again, producing a slightly improved shot. Small victories like this reminded Emily that patience and guidance could work in tandem with skill. Even minor improvements in others fueled her confidence that she could rise to the challenge of leadership. The final drill of the day pushed the recruits to their limits: multiple targets, time pressure, and changing distances. Emily's own muscles ached, yet her focus remained intact. She fired each shot deliberately, her precision unwavering. She noticed other recruits attempting to mimic her method, and for the first time she felt a sense of responsibility, not just for hitting the target herself, but for inspiring those around her to improve. Leadership, she realized, was a balancing act between self-discipline and empathy. By late afternoon, the session ended. Emily had maintained near-perfect scores while helping others subtly improve their performance. Drill instructors exchanged impressed looks, murmuring about her composure, her skill, and her emerging influence on the unit. Though she still battled private doubts about sustaining this leadership under ever-increasing pressure, Emily knew she had taken a critical step forward. She had faced distraction, physical strain, and mental tension, and had emerged steadfast. Back in the barracks, Emily reflected quietly on the day. Doubts lingered, as they always would, but she felt a growing confidence in her ability to guide others and maintain her own composure under pressure. The respect she had begun to earn was tangible, though unspoken, a subtle acknowledgement of her quiet authority and exceptional skill. She realized that her journey was as much about mastering leadership as it was about marksmanship. As night fell, Emily lay on her bunk, rifle case by her side, replaying every shot and interaction in her mind. Each small correction, each subtle demonstration of calm, had contributed to the transformation she had begun to see in her peers. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, tests, and moments of doubt, but she also understood that her skill, focus, and quiet determination had set her apart. For the first time, she felt that she could truly rise to meet whatever trials the Marine Corps would throw at her, one precise shot at a time. The morning fog hung low over the Marine Corps training base, shrouding the rifle range in a quiet, almost eerie calm. For most of the recruits, the previous days had been exhausting, a whirlwind of missed shots, frustration, and pressure that tested their patience and confidence. But today was different. Drill instructors had announced a team-based marksmanship exercise, emphasizing coordination, communication, and shared focus. Emily Carter understood that this was no longer simply about individual performance. The success of the team depended on cohesion, and she knew that her quiet leadership could be the catalyst for transformation. Recruits lined up, rifles in hand, tension visible in their movements. The instructors barked commands, emphasizing speed and accuracy. It was a high-pressure drill designed to push nerves to the limit. Many Marines faltered immediately, their anxiety evident in shaky hands and missed targets. Emily observed closely, noting where coordination faltered and where nerves undermined technique. She recognized familiar patterns from her own early struggles and realized the team needed guidance, not criticism. As the exercise progressed, Emily quietly stepped into a subtle leadership role. Without shouting or asserting dominance, she positioned herself as a model of calm precision. She demonstrated proper breathing, deliberate trigger control, and steady stance, moving through the rounds with smooth, flawless technique. Fellow recruits began to notice. Some hesitated, watching her before taking their own shots. Others whispered to each other, mimicking her posture and methods. Emily's presence became a steadying force in a sea of tension. One particularly anxious recruit, Private Daniels, froze at the firing line, his rifle trembling in his hands. Emily approached quietly, kneeling slightly to meet his gaze. "Focus on your breathing," she said softly, her voice calm but authoritative. "Line up your sights. Take the shot only when you feel steady." Daniels hesitated, took a deep breath, and fired. The bullet struck closer to the target than any of his previous attempts. Relief and surprise washed over him. Emily gave a small nod, a subtle reinforcement of confidence. This moment marked the first visible change, the realization that guidance, not yelling, could inspire improvement. As the exercise continued, Emily's influence spread. More recruits began observing her, aligning their own techniques with hers. Small victories multiplied. A shot that would have missed now struck the bulls. A trembling hand steadied. A sigh of frustration replaced with one of controlled relief. Emily's methodical calmness created a ripple effect, subtly transforming the chaotic energy of the group into a focused, cooperative effort. Even the instructors noticed. Captain Reynolds, observing from the sidelines, raised an eyebrow. "She's doing more than shooting," he muttered. "She's teaching without words, leading without authority, and improving this unit's performance. Remarkable." Emily herself remained unaware of the weight of her influence. She was entirely absorbed in the rhythm of the exercise, guiding others through demonstration rather than command. Midway through the session, the challenge intensified. Targets were moved farther away and additional distractions were introduced: loud noises, sudden commands, and simulated battlefield stressors. Many recruits faltered immediately. Yet Emily continued her flawless routine, every shot precise, every movement deliberate. Her calm presence began to anchor the team. Private Daniels, inspired by her guidance, fired again, hitting the center. Another recruit, previously jittery, steadied himself and made a perfect shot. The murmurs of astonishment grew louder. Emily had shifted from a skilled individual to a quiet leader, shaping collective success. The turning point came during a particularly intense sequence. Multiple targets appeared simultaneously, requiring rapid assessment and execution. Recruits panicked, some firing prematurely, others hesitating too long. Emily assessed each target, moving methodically and calmly. She fired with flawless accuracy, then glanced at her peers, signaling subtle guidance through posture and focus. Slowly, others began to follow, taking shots deliberately rather than in panic. The instructors paused briefly to observe, impressed by the transformation occurring before their eyes. By the final stage of the exercise, the Marines were functioning as a cohesive unit. Mistakes were still made, but the overall performance had improved dramatically. Emily's quiet example had taught them the value of patience, precision, and controlled focus. Drill instructors exchanged nods, clearly recognizing the shift in morale and efficiency. Emily's influence was undeniable. Her skill alone was impressive, but her ability to inspire improvement in others elevated her status from recruit to unofficial mentor. After the exercise concluded, the recruits gathered in the shade of the barracks, exhausted but noticeably more confident. Whispers of admiration and surprise circulated. "I can't believe how calm she stays," one recruit said, "and she's helping us all get better without even telling us what to do." Another added, "I feel like I understand my own mistakes now, thanks to watching her." Emily stood quietly, accepting the recognition in her own reserved manner. She understood that her role was not to dominate or boast, but to elevate those around her. Captain Reynolds approached her, his expression thoughtful. "Sergeant Carter, your precision is extraordinary, but what's more impressive is your leadership. You've improved the unit today, not by words but by example. That's the kind of influence most officers take years to develop." Emily nodded, humbled but proud. She understood that the journey ahead would demand more than perfect aim. It would require resilience, patience, and unwavering focus under increasing pressure. That evening, Emily reflected on the day's events. She realized that true leadership was more than demonstrating skill. It was about guiding others through their own doubts and failures, creating an environment where improvement was possible. She had helped her fellow Marines gain confidence, taught them subtle techniques for focus and precision, and most importantly, shown them that calmness and patience could triumph over fear and frustration. As night fell, Emily sat quietly in the barracks, rifle cleaned and ready beside her, replaying every interaction and shot in her mind. She recognized that the respect she had begun to earn was fragile. Sustaining influence would require constant effort and example. But she also felt a quiet satisfaction. For the first time, she had not only proven herself individually, but had begun to transform the performance and morale of her unit. She lay on her bunk, eyes closed, envisioning the next challenges. The turning point had come. Her peers were beginning to follow, inspired by quiet excellence rather than shouted orders. Emily understood that the journey ahead would test her in new ways, but she was ready. The seeds of leadership had taken root, and now, like her shots on the target, they would grow steadily, one deliberate, precise moment at a time. The rifle range was quiet that morning, but the tension in the air was palpable. Drill instructors had announced a high-stakes test. Each recruit would fire 50 rounds, and the goal was a perfect score. The challenge was designed to push nerves, focus, and skill to the absolute limit. For most recruits, the thought of 50 consecutive flawless shots under scrutiny was terrifying. For Sergeant Emily Carter, it was the culmination of years of training, patience, and unwavering practice. Her heart remained steady, but inside, anticipation coursed like electricity. This was the moment to prove that all her skill, focus, and leadership could withstand the ultimate pressure. As the recruits lined up, whispers rippled through the ranks. Many were skeptical that anyone could achieve perfection. Some glanced nervously at each other, gripping their rifles too tightly, their knuckles white. Emily, however, stood calm, shoulders relaxed, eyes scanning the targets with measured focus. She had visualized this moment countless times. Every shot, every breath, every adjustment. She understood the importance of mental preparation. Her technique was flawless, yes, but her mind had to be steadier still. The first shots rang out, breaking the morning silence. Many recruits missed their targets immediately, some barely hitting the outer rings. Frustration was quick to flare. A few cursed under their breath, others froze in anxiety. Emily observed quietly, adjusting her breathing, centering herself. She reminded herself of her father's lessons. It's not the number of shots, Emily. It's the quality of each one. Control the mind and the rifle will obey. She exhaled slowly, let go of any tension, and fired her first round. Dead center. The second, third, and fourth shots followed the same pattern, precise, deliberate, perfect. Around her, instructors and fellow recruits began to notice. A few whispered in awe. "She hasn't missed a single shot," muttered one. Another added, "I thought yesterday was amazing, but this is unreal." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Every bullet required absolute focus. Her mind blocked out the murmurs, the glances, the pressure. 50 perfect shots demanded total immersion in the moment. As the rounds progressed, the pressure increased. Drill instructors paced behind her, shouting reminders to stay calm, maintain form, and aim carefully. Their voices were sharp, demanding, but Emily remained a pillar of composure. The rhythm of firing became almost meditative. Inhale, steady, exhale, fire. Shot after shot, her aim remained true. She felt her muscles working instinctively, honed by countless hours of training. Every target struck reinforced her confidence, yet she didn't allow herself a moment of complacency. Each shot was just as important as the first. By the halfway mark, whispers of astonishment had spread across the range. Recruits who had doubted her earlier now watched with awe and respect. Even the drill instructors, hardened by years of training Marines, exchanged impressed glances. "She's doing what most recruits couldn't dream of," one muttered quietly. Emily, however, ignored the attention. Any distraction could compromise focus, and perfection demanded absolute mental clarity. She inhaled deeply, feeling her body and mind align, and fired the 25th shot dead center. A small internal thrill surged, but she allowed it to pass, returning immediately to her rhythm. The final rounds were the hardest. Fatigue began to creep in. Her arms ached from holding the rifle steadily for so long, her eyes strained from repeated focus on distant targets. Sweat beaded on her brow, threatening distraction. Emily reminded herself that precision was not about speed but control. One misstep now could ruin the perfect score. She clenched her teeth slightly, exhaled, and continued. Each shot was deliberate, measured, controlled. Despite physical strain and mental pressure, her aim remained flawless. Some recruits began to whisper encouragement. Private Daniels, who had struggled in previous exercises, whispered to himself, "If she can do this, maybe I can too." Others tried to emulate her calm demeanor, mimicking her breathing, her slow trigger squeeze. Emily had become more than a sharpshooter. She was a living demonstration of composure, skill, and mental fortitude. The range no longer felt chaotic. Her example had transformed the atmosphere. When she reached the 45th shot, Emily's focus was razor-sharp. Only 5 rounds remained between her and perfection. Every sense was heightened. The subtle pressure of the rifle against her shoulder, the faint vibration of recoil, the steady rhythm of her breathing. Around her, recruits and instructors watched silently, the collective anticipation almost tangible. Emily blocked everything out except the target, the rifle, and the precise alignment of each shot. 46th shot, center. 47th shot, center. 48th, center, 2 more. Emily's hands were steady despite the hours of exertion. Her mind was clear, her body fully attuned to the rifle. 49th shot, dead center. A ripple of awe moved through the line. Instructors whispered among themselves. Recruits held their breath. It had come down to the final shot. Emily inhaled slowly, exhaled with control, and aimed deliberately. Time seemed to stretch, the distant sounds of the bass fading into silence. She squeezed the trigger, feeling the familiar recoil, and opened her eyes. The bullet struck dead center. 50 perfect shots. The range erupted, not with chaos or complaints, but with astonished cheers and applause. Fellow recruits stared at her in disbelief. Drill instructors exchanged wide-eyed nods of approval. Emily Carter had done what no one else could. She had achieved the perfect 50. Even in the midst of celebration, Emily remained composed. She lowered her rifle slowly, allowing the moment to sink in. She had proven more than skill. She had proven that focus, patience, and determination could overcome pressure, fatigue, and doubt. Around her, fellow recruits were inspired, not only by the perfection of her aim, but by the calm, disciplined mindset that made it possible. Captain Reynolds approached, a mix of pride and astonishment on his face. "Sergeant Carter," he said firmly, "what you've accomplished today is remarkable. You've shown precision, control, and composure at a level rarely seen in Marines at any stage of training. But more importantly, you've inspired your unit. That's leadership." Emily nodded, humbled, knowing that her achievement was about more than a perfect score. It was about setting an example, lifting others, and demonstrating the power of focus and resilience. By the end of the day, Emily had become more than a sharpshooter. She had become a symbol of what was possible with discipline, patience, and mental fortitude. Fellow recruits crowded around, asking for guidance, tips, and encouragement. Even those who had been skeptical now looked to her as a quiet mentor. Emily's perfect 50 was not just a personal triumph, it was a turning point for the entire unit. That night, as she lay in her bunk, rifle cleaned and carefully stored, Emily reflected on the day. 50 perfect shots had required every ounce of skill, focus, and mental strength she possessed. She realized that excellence was not a one-time achievement. It was the result of persistent effort, patience, and resilience. The perfect 50 was proof, not of luck, but of preparation, discipline, and determination. For the first time, she understood fully the power of her example. Her peers had seen what dedication and composure could achieve. They had been inspired to believe, to try harder, and to strive for excellence themselves. Emily smiled faintly, knowing that the journey was far from over, but that the foundation for leadership, respect, and transformation had been solidly laid, one perfect shot at a time. The barracks hummed with quiet excitement the morning after Emily Carter achieved the perfect 50. Word of her flawless performance had spread like wildfire through the training base. Recruits whispered in awe, fellow Marines stared in admiration, and drill instructors exchanged nods of recognition. Emily herself remained calm, as always, but beneath the composed exterior, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Her achievement had been personal, yes, but the true reward was seeing the spark of inspiration it ignited in her peers. As she entered the common area, several recruits turned to watch her approach. Private Daniels, the once anxious recruit she had quietly guided, stood straighter, shoulders squared, and approached with newfound confidence. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice tinged with respect and awe, I just wanted to say thank you. Watching you today, it made me realize I can do this too." Emily smiled gently, nodding. "Keep practicing. Focus on control, not speed. Confidence comes from preparation." Daniels grinned, a mixture of pride and determination shining in his eyes. Emily's influence had become more than mere admiration. It was contagious. Around the room, other recruits who had struggled with marksmanship now demonstrated subtle improvements. Some approached her cautiously, asking for guidance on breathing techniques, stance, or trigger control. Emily listened patiently, demonstrating movements without words whenever possible. Her teaching was quiet but effective, grounded in example and subtle corrections. She had moved from being a remarkable shooter to an inspiring mentor, and the respect she earned was genuine. The drill instructors called everyone to the range for a debrief. Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his expression one of pride mixed with mild astonishment. "Marines," he began, his voice commanding attention, "today we witnessed something extraordinary. Sergeant Carter has demonstrated perfect precision under extreme pressure, and in doing so she has inspired her peers. This is what the Marine Corps values, not just skill, but leadership, composure, and the ability to elevate others." The room was silent, every recruit absorbing the weight of his words. Emily stood quietly at the side, observing the effect her achievement had on the unit. The energy in the barracks had shifted. Where frustration and doubt had dominated before, now there was determination, focus, and a sense of possibility. Recruits who had been skeptical or intimidated by the challenge now approached with curiosity and eagerness to learn. Emily realized that her role had evolved. She was no longer just a recruit striving for excellence. She was a quiet pillar of the unit, a standard of skill and composure to which others aspired. The instructors assigned a team drill for the afternoon, pairing experienced marksmen with less confident recruits. Emily was paired with Private Daniels, a natural choice given her previous guidance and his rapid improvement. "Let's focus on rhythm and consistency," Emily said, her voice calm and steady. "We'll take it one shot at a time, and I'll show you how to anticipate your movements." Daniels nodded, his nerves steadied by her composed presence. As the exercise began, Emily demonstrated flawless technique. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, precise. Daniels followed her lead, gradually finding his own rhythm. The subtle influence of Emily's example was evident in every movement he made. Other pairs on the line began to mimic her methods, watching her stance, breathing, and focus. By the end of the exercise, the overall performance of the unit had improved dramatically. Where once there had been panic and chaos, now there was focus, coordination, and determination. By evening, the day's achievements were being discussed around the barracks. Recruits spoke in hushed tones of Emily's skill, her composure, and the quiet way she had guided them to improvement. "I didn't think anyone could teach us by just example," one whispered. "But she did," said another. Even those who had doubted her now looked to her with admiration and respect. Emily, for her part, accepted their acknowledgement humbly, understanding that leadership was not about accolades, but about fostering growth in others. Captain Reynolds called Emily aside privately. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice low but firm, "your performance today and over the past week has been exceptional. You've not only demonstrated perfect marksmanship, but you've also quietly lifted the performance of your unit. You've earned the respect of your peers and your instructors. That is leadership in its purest form." Emily nodded, gratitude and humility mingling within her. She knew that recognition was meaningful, but the true satisfaction lay in seeing her peers improve and gain confidence. That night the barracks were filled with chatter and laughter, a stark contrast to the tense, frustrated atmosphere of previous days. Emily lay on her bunk, reflecting on the journey. From her first day of struggle to her perfect 50, she had learned that true skill was inseparable from composure and patience. She had learned that leadership was not about asserting dominance or authority, but about example, empathy, and quiet guidance. And she had learned that inspiring others could be just as rewarding as achieving perfection oneself. As she drifted toward sleep, Emily thought about the weeks ahead. The challenges would only grow more difficult, but she felt ready. The respect she had earned, the subtle influence she had established, and the confidence she had cultivated in herself and her peers had created a foundation that could withstand future trials. She understood that the journey of a Marine was long and demanding, but she had taken the first steps toward leaving a lasting impact. In the days that followed, Emily's presence continued to shape the unit. Recruits who had once struggled now approached drills with determination rather than dread. They sought guidance, applied her techniques, and quietly encouraged one another. The instructors noted the shift in morale and efficiency, often smiling at the subtle leadership they had witnessed. Emily's perfect 50 had not been just a numerical achievement. It had become a symbol of excellence, resilience, and quiet influence. Through it all, Emily remained humble and focused. She knew that the respect she had earned was a privilege, not a guarantee. Every drill, every shot, every interaction with her peers was an opportunity to reinforce the values of discipline, focus, and composure. She had discovered that true leadership was continuous, requiring consistent example and unwavering attention to both personal performance and the growth of others. By the end of the week, the unit had transformed. What had begun as a group of anxious, frustrated recruits was now a team capable of focus, coordination, and mutual support. Emily's role as a quiet mentor and exemplar of precision had been central to that transformation. Drill instructors noted her influence and began assigning her to guide other small groups, recognizing that her approach could multiply the effectiveness of the unit. In the quiet of her bunk that night, Emily reflected on the journey. She had proven her skill, inspired her peers, and earned the respect of those around her, not through force or words, but through steady focus, perfect precision, and subtle guidance. The perfect 50 had been a milestone, but the true victory was the transformation of the unit and the trust and respect she had fostered. Emily knew the journey was far from over, but she had discovered something more important than perfection: the power to inspire, elevate, and lead quietly yet profoundly. The sun was beginning to set over the Marine Corps training base, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The day had been long, filled with drills, practice, and quiet moments of reflection. For Sergeant Emily Carter, the day was a chance to look back on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a determined but nervous recruit to a respected markswoman and quiet leader among her peers. The perfect 50, the mentorship, and the respect she had earned were not just milestones. They were a testament to persistence, discipline, and composure. Emily walked slowly along the range, the rifle case slung over her shoulder. Around her, the barracks and training grounds were buzzing with activity. Recruits practiced drills, instructors called out commands, and the atmosphere was one of focused energy. Emily's presence was unassuming, yet the impact she had left on the unit was evident. Recruits now moved with confidence, carrying themselves with a sense of purpose that had been absent when she first arrived. Many glanced at her with quiet admiration, others nodded in respect, and some sought subtle guidance without words. Her influence had become a part of the culture of the unit. She paused at the edge of the range and observed a small group of recruits practicing. Private Daniels, the once anxious recruit she had guided early on, adjusted his stance and fired with surprising accuracy. Emily smiled quietly to herself. His transformation was one of many. She remembered the first days, hesitant hands, nervous glances, frustration etched on faces, and she recognized how far they had all come. What had started as personal achievement had evolved into collective growth. Her actions, discipline, and calm had created a ripple effect, lifting the entire team. Captain Reynolds approached, his expression a mixture of pride and reflection. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice steady but warm, "you've done more than achieve a perfect score. You've left a legacy here. Your peers respect you, they've grown under your example, and the unit's performance has improved dramatically. That is the mark of a true Marine." Emily nodded, humbled. Recognition from a seasoned instructor was meaningful, but she understood that the real accomplishment lay in the transformation of her peers. Leadership was not about accolades. It was about elevating others while maintaining your own excellence. Emily spent the evening walking through the barracks, observing the subtle changes in the recruits' behavior. They were calmer, more focused, and more confident in their abilities. Even the previously skeptical Marines had adopted elements of her technique, stance, breathing, trigger control, without needing to be told. Emily realized that the lessons she had shared were becoming second nature, not because she demanded them, but because she had demonstrated the value of discipline through example. She had become a living model of precision, patience, and composure. As she prepared for the night, Emily reflected on her personal journey. The perfect 50 had been a milestone, yes, but it had also been a lesson in resilience, focus, and mental toughness. Each shot had required complete attention and discipline, mirroring the challenges of leadership itself. She understood that success in the Marines was not just about individual skill. It was about the ability to inspire, guide, and elevate others under pressure. This realization was perhaps the most important lesson of all. Lying on her bunk that night, Emily thought about the future. She imagined returning to the range in months or years, seeing recruits who had been inspired by her guidance now leading their own teams with confidence and skill. She envisioned a cycle of mentorship, where quiet leadership, precision, and composure continued to influence new generations of Marines. The idea of leaving a lasting impact, not just through perfection but through guidance and example, filled her with quiet satisfaction. Emily also reflected on her own growth. She had entered the Marines with determination and skill, but also with doubts, insecurities, and fear of failure. Every challenge, the initial struggles on the range, the distractions, the fatigue, and the pressure, had been a test not just of marksmanship, but of mental fortitude. She had learned that excellence was not about never faltering. It was about resilience, learning from mistakes, and consistently striving to improve. Her journey was as much about personal development as it was about inspiring others. The next morning, Emily woke early, the dawn light spilling across the barracks. Recruits were already moving toward the range, carrying rifles and gear with a quiet sense of purpose. Emily joined them, walking among the group as she had done countless times before. She offered guidance where necessary, demonstrated technique when asked, and maintained her calm, composed presence. Her peers had internalized much of what she had taught them, and the unit now operated with a rhythm and focus that had been absent before her influence. As the day progressed, Emily observed subtle signs of lasting change. Recruits corrected each other, shared tips, and encouraged one another without needing direct oversight. Discipline, patience, and precision had become part of the team's culture, largely because she had modeled these qualities consistently. Emily realized that leadership was a long-term endeavor. Her influence had planted seeds, but it was the consistency and patience that allowed them to grow. Her legacy would endure not because of the perfect 50 alone, but because she had shown the value of composure, example, and quiet guidance. Later that afternoon, Captain Reynolds called the unit together for a brief debrief. "Marines," he said, scanning the group with a satisfied gaze, "today I see the results of dedication, discipline, and quiet leadership. Sergeant Carter has set a standard that we can all aspire to. Remember, excellence is not just in hitting the target, but in maintaining focus, composure, and patience in every action." Emily listened, humbled, knowing that while her achievement had drawn attention, it was the collective growth and transformation of her peers that mattered most. As evening fell, Emily sat alone for a few quiet moments at the edge of the range. The targets, now empty, reflected the fading light. She thought about every shot she had fired, every recruit she had guided, and every subtle moment of leadership that had contributed to the team's transformation. Her journey had been demanding, challenging, and at times exhausting, but it had also been deeply rewarding. She understood that her role in the Marines went beyond personal skill. It was about influence, example, and the quiet power of consistent effort. Finally, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emily packed up her gear and returned to her bunk. She lay down, rifle cleaned and stored, reflecting on the lessons of the past weeks. She had achieved perfection, inspired her peers, and earned respect, not through force or words, but through skill, patience, and example. Emily understood that the journey of a Marine was lifelong, filled with challenges, growth, and opportunities to lead quietly yet profoundly. Her thoughts drifted to the recruits who had struggled, the skeptics who had doubted her, and the friends who had now found confidence in their abilities. She knew that her legacy was not measured in scores, but in the transformation of those around her. The respect she had earned, the influence she had cultivated, and the lessons she had imparted would continue to ripple through the unit long after the perfect 50 became a memory. With a quiet smile, Emily closed her eyes. She had learned that true excellence was about more than hitting a target. It was about composure, consistency, and the ability to inspire others to reach their potential. The perfect 50 was a milestone, but her lasting impact, her legacy, and the respect she had earned were the true markers of success. Emily Carter had not only mastered her rifle, she had mastered the art of quiet leadership, resilience, and inspiration.